Hey everyone,
Hey guys,
welcome to our very first episode of the Infinitech podcast, where we explore the world of technology and the limitless possibilities. I'm Krishna.
I'm Manav, and on today's episode, we'll be touching on how tech impacts underprivileged communities and makes the world a better place overall. I'm super excited to see what we talk about in this episode.
Yeah, so I wanted to start off the episode by talking about the intersection of healthcare and technology, more specifically how drones in Africa are being used to send medical packages to remote places in just minutes. And I chose this topic because it kind of hits close to me in my personal experience. Because as you know, Manav, when I was born in India, it was a
Mhm.
remote place, more so like a village slash town, right? And there I could see the medical facilities. It was just a small like house with just the bare bones necessities, right? They didn't have any like blood transfusions or even like fridges that store like these, like day to day like medical activities such as just transfusing blood. And the drones in Africa, more specifically in Rwanda, are being able to send these blood transfusions and like blood packets in just minutes to all of these like villages and rural areas. So it's a company called Zipline, right? It's an American-based company, but there's been a government agreement with the government of Rwanda and the U.S. company to sort of just start this here. And the reason for that is because it's, I think, still in the preliminary stages. It's not just implemented worldwide. So, but there has been shown great success in this. And the reason for that is because in Rwanda, there's around 12 million people, and about 83% of them are just in rural areas. So you can already imagine the necessity for when people just need medical packets or just blood packets, right? And this company, it delivers around 500 deliveries every single day. And the method that it does that is pretty intuitive actually, but
Mhm.
it's also really the ingenuity is amazing.
Mhm.
So it's a drone, right? But it's like sort of packaged into like a plane.
Mhm.
And so this drone is just launched in like some of these hubs in
Mhm.
Rwanda. There's currently I think two hubs that are placed in the country right now. And so what happens is there's a whole like medical facility where there's just a lot of like storage of blood packets, and I think specifically they're doing blood packets now, but they could store like as much as they need, right? And so what happens is these facilities they store all these because the facility first like blood can't spoil, like you need to like have like refrigerators and like
Yeah.
medical refrigerators, right? But these rural areas they don't have that. So the thing is, like, they store like everything in one place, and then when a village like doctor or like hospital needs it, they just send a message to these like hubs, and they load it up into the drones, and they just launch them right away, and it's all like autonomous, right? So just GPS based, satellite based, and it goes straight to these rural areas and just drops them into in like a parachute like format, right? So
Mhm.
it just drops straight into the village in the rural areas or wherever it needs to be, and the doctors come pick it up, and then they just get it, and the drone like recirculates back and comes straight back to the hub again, and it's just autonomous, robotic, like it just keeps going over and over, and that's how there's 500 deliveries every single day.
That's really cool. I mean, I think that that idea is completely like innovative, and they're using drones for like a great purpose. I just like, the fact that they were able to GPS track it and make sure that every person gets like the right packets. Like I'm wondering, so you mentioned that like the blood expires obviously, and like there's only one place that they keep all of this. So like how do they get their supply? Like how does it not run out? Or like how do they keep getting like more and more inventory for these kind of things? Like if it's like in one area, it must be like not too like big to hold everything, right?
Yeah, yeah. So this I think is based from the U.S. company, like the Zipline
Mhm.
company, and so like they're like medically equipped, right? So they
Mhm.
have the facility to store all these packets and everything.
Mhm.
And the issue is like you could have like a car just do this, like it's
Mhm.
like just transportation, like you can do it within a day.
Yeah.
But the thing is, by drone, it's consistently always been 41 minutes or less. But
Wow.
while on the road, it would take at least 2 hours. And you might not think like, oh, 41 minutes versus 2 hours, it's only like an
Mhm.
hour-ish difference. But the reason is like in cases of like emergencies, like you need this like on the spot, right? Especially if
Right.
there's like an accident or something and they need like lots of blood, like right on the like ASAP.
Mhm.
So these facilities have the capability to store them, and the drones just make it easier to travel like way quicker. And
Mhm.
in every scenario, no matter how like far or how close, you may
Mhm.
think like, oh, if a car is like by car if it's only like a 10-minute drive. It may
Hmm.
be faster than like a drone to like set it up, put the batteries in, get it all flying and everything. But no, it's shown like consistently in every scenario, no matter how
Hmm.
far or short, it's always been like faster than a car, even if it's been like 3 minutes faster than a car. But at that point, like the drones, I think, are used more so for long distances.
Right.
And yeah, it's all battery powered. That's why it's
Uh,
like reusable because once the
mhm.
drone comes back, you just charge it with like a different battery, and the battery just like comes off. So it's not like you have to wait for the drone. You can just have multiple batteries and just like change it as you need to go.
Yeah, this sounds pretty interesting. I mean, this opens up a huge venue of like drones being used for other purposes.
Hmm.
I mean, like if drones are being used to drop packets, like who knows, they could be used to drop food or any other like kind of necessary supplies, water for like areas that don't have, clean water.
Hmm.
You could just have an inventory of clean water that you received and basically just drop it off at areas that people need it. I think that yeah, like drones again are like a super useful tool, especially to just transport things, as you said, autonomously to areas that need it. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just amazing because now that they're like done with the testing stages, they're like they've
Mhm.
seen these results come like proven to be really good.
Mhm.
It's going to be amazing to see these in not just Africa, but in other remote countries such as India itself,
Mhm.
in remote areas of India, in third world countries like all over the globe,
Mhm.
even in America. Like sometimes there's remote areas, cities or like towns or even like small like states
Mhm.
that might just need it quickly. And we don't need to limit it just to blood transfusions, right? Maybe you could
Mhm.
do like different medical cares, medical packages just on the spot, especially when there's like big natural disasters. I'm sure you know like we've had a lot of those like this past year.
Mhm.
There's always need for like medical care and packages, and
Mhm.
timing is just the biggest factor when it comes to saving a person's life. And I think these drones are really effective and efficient. We just need a much better way to scale them,
Mhm.
and scaling is just going to take a lot of funding, a lot of time.
Mhm.
But I'm sure like in the next like 5 years, we're going to see drastic changes to the medical technology industry.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this sounds like a DoorDash for like medical supplies. Like it's
Yeah.
like insane. It's so efficient and like it sounds like it works really well for these areas that need it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of bounce off like how you mentioned, underprivileged areas needing like medical supplies. There actually is a new use for 3D printing that has impacted communities all over the place. It's a nonprofit organization called Field Ready. They basically have 3D printers in places that like are suffering privatization, like Haiti, and
Hmm.
they work on actually printing on-demand medical equipment like birthing kits, umbilical clamps,
Hmm.
and oxygen splitters for oxygen tanks. So this is like just insane new use for 3D printing. I mean, 3D printing has grown so much over the years. It used to be like something that we would think, okay, we can make a small little like logo or something and just have it as on display. But now it's being used to create full-on medical equipment that can be used in a real case scenario.
Hmm.
And again, like you mentioned, these communities lack medical supplies, and 3D printing is a great tool that they can use now to create like these supplies that they don't necessarily have. So yeah, I mean, this is just like one of the areas that 3D printing is being used.
Yeah, like 3D printing is just a booming industry now. Like I'm sure you know there's so many more avenues for 3D
Hmm.
printing. Just like one question I guess for that is just like in terms of like recyclability,
Hmm.
how like how does that come into play when building these medical packages or like facilities or anything that you have to add on for 3D printing? Like what do
Yeah.
you think about just the reusability, I guess, aspect?
Yeah, definitely. So that actually touches on a point that I read somewhere in an article, but
Hmm.
there's this startup called Protoprint, and they're basically developing a unique ink using plastic filament. And get this, it's from waste in underprivileged areas like
Hmm.
India. And the thing is that, not a lot of people realize, but a large group of people actually make a living off of waste picking. In India, that's a full career where they're
Hmm.
basically picking up waste and thinking about it, if they can sell that waste to the 3D printers because the 3D printers use that waste as ink, not only do they make money for selling the waste, but the printers also develop pretty basic products. So again, like as a statistic that like again, I'm sure not a lot of people know about, but 15 million people, almost 15 million people globally make a living off of waste picking and only earn less than a dollar a day. that is like no money at all, and
Hmm.
they are working really tirelessly to kind of keep the world clean. So what Protoprint does is they actually buy the filament for 300 rupees, which is like about $3. And they basically allow for the ink, the waste to be converted into ink, and they instead of having countries be reliant on external sources, it makes countries more self-sufficient, rather than like importing products from abroad that aren't really suitable for like a local context. They basically just use this recycled filament and create like, although they are low end products, they are still functional products that can be used in development contexts, which puts the means of production just completely in the hands of local people. And that was just something that I don't think a lot of people understand about like the 3D printing aspect, is that, you don't need a lot of money or a lot of material to make it.
Hmm.
People in India are now using waste to make use out of the 3D printers and use it as ink.
Yeah, no, that's actually amazing because I know like there's such a big disparity in India with like
Mhm.
like upper middle class, rich class
Mhm.
versus just like the poor. It's like really, really like transparent when you just see like big cities. There's just slums like right next to like big city, like big houses.
Yeah.
So just like a question I had with
Mhm.
how when they like collect the waste and everything, right?
Mhm.
So are there like facilities where they can print this stuff, or is there a separate company that's printing based on the waste that they collect? Like a
So yeah, that's a great question. I mean, basically, Protoprint buys the filament from this company called SWA CH.
okay.
It's just another company that basically collects all the waste, and Protoprint just buys the filament from there. And I believe, again, I'm not sure about this, but I believe that that company then is provides like income to these people that pick the waste.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how it works. It's like almost like a facility where they're collecting the waste. Protoprint then buys the filament from them after they convert it to ink,
Hmm.
and that way Protoprint now is making products using waste that is converted into ink.
Yeah. No, it's amazing how the manufacturing industry is just going to be changed with all these recyclable and also like
Uh-huh.
creating jobs in a sense, right? Because now there's more avenues for the waste collectors to actually earn money out of this.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, the cooler part about 3D printing is
Hmm.
there's this aspect of homelessness that a lot of people have been trying to solve.
Yeah.
And there's this company that actually uses, again, 3D printing. It's called New Story, the startup, and
Hmm.
they're basically providing durable, affordable, permanent housing to families without homes all over the world. And put that into perspective. You have a small 3D printer that's
Hmm.
basically creating an entire house. And again, statistics to support this. It's in Latin America, over $7 billion is annually spent on social housing. And the thing is that the quality of these homes were not great. Like they were not, they were all packed in like a one street, and it wasn't very comfortable. But the thing is that this company, New Story, is basically um, creating homes out of 3D printing. And another statistic is that 900 million people all over the globe live in subadequate housing. So this company is targeting those 900 million people to
Hmm.
ensure that homelessness just isn't a problem anymore.
Yeah. No, that's it's actually interesting that you bring up the area of like homelessness
Hmm.
because right now I'm like living in Cali, right?
Hmm.
And it's been like a big problem in San Francisco areas, especially like recently after
Hmm.
COVID layoffs. And I'm sure this isn't the only city that's been impacted, right? There's a lot of big major cities that are where employees of like startups, small businesses, they're just like family-owned businesses, like they've all just been shut down completely. And if that was their only source of income,
Hmm.
homelessness just spiked like exponentially, right?
Hmm.
And when there's a problem even in major cities, you can only imagine how that is in remote countries, right?
Hmm.
So building housing, it's definitely something that's necessary. But one question I just have is like the timing of all this, right?
Hmm.
Um, would you think it takes more time to build using a 3D printer or just using like regular construction materials and what's how does that work?
Yeah, definitely. So that's a great question. I mean, a piece of research I saw was that these 3D printers actually create houses within a day or 2 days,
Okay.
which is completely fast. And
Hmm.
again, keep in mind that these houses aren't like your most glamorous houses. They
Right.
don't like they're not like $1 million mansions. They're basically just small little pieces of property that basically allow for someone to comfortably live in. And so again, like homelessness is a huge problem, and a lot of people have been trying to solve it. And this is like a great step in that direction to solving that major problem that exists all over the world. Um, so.
Yeah. No, just like bouncing off of like how like the world population is, increasing
Mhm,
exponentially. It's said that we're going to reach 10 billion in just a few years, right? A few
mhm,
decades maybe.
mhm,
And with that, not only is homelessness rising, but also like food production, right?
mhm.
Like we need a lot of food. And it's actually said that food production will need to increase by 60% when we reach the 10 billion mark.
Right.
And just because food consumption is going to be just as exponential as the population growth. And so the thing with artificial intelligence and robotics is that they're like finally entering this agricultural field, right? It
Mhm,
might seem like an oxymoron just saying like tech in agriculture, right? Because agriculture you might think is like backward and tech is like the future, right? But the way that they're integrating tech is just so amazing, and we're going to see a lot of help to farmers and even making food like crops and everything like tailoring them, sowing them, getting all these like from the moment you put it into the ground to the moment you reap everything, like everything is going to be autonomous,
mhm,
right? And the thing with that's currently happening that takes a lot of time is that when crops are planted, there's a lot that can happen, right? Pests can invade a field, diseases can spread, rodents, weeds can proliferate, stealing these resources and all these like different areas of harvest going wrong. And we've seen that a lot, especially with global warming and everything. There's been a lot of different ways that harvesting in crops is becoming a more difficulty even for the average human.
mhm,
But the place where technology comes into play is going to be autonomous robots that can regularly help monitor these farmers and catch the problems before they even lead to significant losses or before they even proliferate, right?
mhm,
Manually checking all these takes a lot of time from a farmer, or even if you have like lots of farmers.
mhm.
But these robots can navigate these fields just through GPS and also just AI to go through every single plot and have like the technology to sense the crops above ground and also below ground, right? So like soil content, water content, and then like pests that are like on top of the ground.
Mhm.
These like robots just sense everything, right? So there's this company, I think, that's called CentiV. So it's like a robot that uses two cameras to image these crops from above and below. And the data from these cameras is analyzed by AI to spot threats, monitor the growth, and identify signs if the plant needs more or less water and nutrients. So I
Mhm.
think that's like a big boom that's happening, especially in the agriculture industry.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, agriculture is also a huge part about the world that, again, kind of goes unnoticed when it comes to tech. Everyone's kind of talking about, the new stuff like Gen AI, but no one talks about like these very valuable and vital aspect of life that, need to be looked after. One question I had was, you mentioned that these robots can detect things that shouldn't be there or like just help harvest these crops. How do they exactly solve the pest issue? Like, you said that they notice like if there are pests, but like how do they actually get rid of them, or what do they kind of do in response to these like
Yeah.
sensors?
Yeah, the thing with like just like human error, right? When you like monitor pests in like
Hmm.
a let's just say like 1 acre out of like a lot of acres of land that you have.
Hmm.
If you notice that there's just a lot of pests there, you might have prone to human error and be like, okay, there's a
Hmm.
lot of pests in this area. Maybe I just cover like a lot more around this central area.
Hmm.
But the thing with like the technology that is rising is that it will actually pinpoint the exact area, square footage, whatever you want to see, like within like the farms, right? And
Hmm.
it'll only target that by putting the exact amount of herbicide, pesticide, and everything that needs to be going in. And the thing with this is that these robots cover around 50 acres a day,
Wow.
and just for a human, that's insane amount,
Hmm.
right? These like humans can't really like just do 50 acres of square footage every single day.
Hmm.
And the consistent pattern that these robots are training and like the AI is trained on is able to really navigate exactly when and where it needs to be, like put pesticide in, when it needs to be reaped, when it needs to be harvested, and all these things. And the big issue that we use in the past is if we just did like satellite images, you'd only be able to see like if there's like an infection in one area, but you wouldn't be able to see like below the ground, right? And robots in the past used to be just built with tires. And when these tires would just go rolling around in the fields, it would actually destroy the crops. So this CentiV robot that I was talking about, it actually uses like really tiny spokes that tread along the farms, and it doesn't damage the crops at all. So that's like the new feature that they've been adding is it's able to do both the like best of both worlds, like satellite and the robots that used to have wheels that would be able to track underground resources. So that's like the biggest thing about this robot is able to combine the best of both worlds and not destroy any crops and help farmers like immensely.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's super fascinating. I mean, they seem like they've covered every area that needs to be considered. But speaking of agriculture, I mean, the another huge issue that everyone I think knows about that happens in underprivileged communities is like clean water.
Mhm.
So do you have like any kind of any robot or any tool that's being used that, provides clean water, and, as we're talking about agriculture?
Mhm. Yeah, in terms of like robotics that are helping with like cleansing and everything,
Hmm.
there's this drone slash robot that's called the Pixie drone, right? So
Hmm.
it's a drone that collects floating wastewater, and
Hmm.
it's all completely remote controlled or even like operating fully autonomously. It just depends on
Hmm.
how the user wants to use it,
Hmm.
and it allows you to quickly take action after identifying like the waste collected areas. So if you think of like a regular like lake or anything, you might just see it and not really pick up any of like the microplastics. You like as a human eye, you can't really see all of these, right? But
Hmm.
this drone, it's able to really like hone in on where there's like a lot of plastic waste, a lot of human waste, microplastics. That's a big thing that's happening in ocean water and everything, right? So this Pixie drone, it uses a camera with LiDAR technology to avoid obstacles and also detect all sorts of dust, chemicals, waste products, like everything, right?
Hmm.
And it's able to operate for up to 6 hours just by itself.
Hmm.
So in a given day, it's able to collect around 160 liters as its capacity. And the best part about it is it's fully compatible with saltwater, freshwater, and brackish water. So it's able to be put in any type of like scenario, any type of case, and that's the best part. You can clean all around the world.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that sounds super interesting. I think to double down on that, to target another issue that's going on is there's actually water filtration that's solar powered. So rather than using, electricity or batteries to power like a robot, there is essentially a tool, this company called Innovative Water Technologies. They developed a water filtration system called Sunspring Hybrid, which essentially has a self-contained portable solar and wind-powered system that provides 20,000 liters of clean water a day for 10 years or more. So think about it. In developing countries, I think about 80% of sewage is discharged untreated into waterways. So you have a bunch of completely dirty water and contaminated water in these areas, and people are getting sick off of this water. They don't have access to clean water or any tools that basically get rid of all the bacteria and, again, as you said, microplastics. But to kind of double down on like another issue that is being faced is that like electricity is being used a lot, and a lot of things nowadays want to be converted into renewable sources, right? Like solar and
Hmm.
water and wind energy. So this water filtration system, I think, is super cool. And just like the robot that you mentioned, this basically just has a system that's solar powered, and it provides clean water for many years, for decades
Hmm.
and more. So.
Yeah. No, like energy is definitely like the biggest topic as we enter
Mhm.
this like global warming area. Like it's definitely like a like sensibility that technology needs to cover.
Mhm.
And I love how you bring up like water like management and there's a lot of need for like clean water, fresh water, right?
Mhm.
But like most of the world's water is just completely saline, right? And I
Yeah.
remember in high school we had this project for
Yeah.
desalination. That'd be great to just go over.
Yeah. Again, that project was amazing. We worked on it together. But the cool thing about that was actually that it used a graphene filter.
Hmm.
And for anyone who doesn't know what graphene is, it's basically this single layer of carbon atoms that are bound in this hexagon shape. Think almost like a honeycomb. It's a lattice. And so the thing with this graphene filter is that it has pore sizes that are as small as 5 nanometers, which is 20,000 times smaller than a human hair. And to think about that, that means that any piece of bacteria or any microplastic, anything can be easily caught in these graphene filters. And the thing is that like back then, we thought about this and we realized that graphene is a very useful, kind of tool, a useful, piece of, carbon atoms, like this lattice that can catch any bacteria or anything that makes water, contaminated. And it kind of erases all these dangerous pathogens. So, yeah, again, like I think that, graphene desalination is a new, an upcoming kind of topic in water filtration. So,
Yeah, no, it's like the fact that graphene is not only able to like desalinate the water,
mhm,
but it's small enough to capture these microplastics, right? I think
exactly.
I saw somewhere in a study that it was very recently found, like the first time ever, like microplastics were found in human bodies,
Hmm.
right? And this is just because of the recyclable like nature of water. You
Yep.
know, once it goes into the oceans, recycled comebacks and like water filtration, everything, they don't catch these microplastics and the
Hmm.
very own plastics that we as humans are putting out into the world. So I think it's just amazing that we need to really focus in on uh, having like fresh, clean water, and more than I can see, I guess, like more than like the waste itself, like there needs to be like a filter for these microplastics, and even saline. That's like a big issue that graphene is definitely like hitting on.
Exactly. And, on the topic of water filtration, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of, the life straw. I don't know if you've
Mhm.
heard about that. But it's essentially like it uses nanotechnology. So this basically uses submicroscopic membranes to filter contaminants from water so it can reach like adequately levels of like clean water, right?
Mhm.
And so the way that this straw works, and this is, a lot of people have tested it out, seen how it works, and it's very effective. Actually, it just sucks the water through a membrane, and it basically just filters out every piece of, contamination or bacteria in that water. And the funny thing is that like I've seen a lot of instances where people are using it, and they'll have like a glass of completely contaminated water. It's like not even like clear. It's just like brown, and it's got like, any possible thing you could think of in it.
Mhm.
And they basically use the life straw and they put the water in another cup, and the water's clear.
Mhm.
So like just using this life straw, you have created clean water. And this is like uses nanotechnology, which again is a super fascinating topic in the area of computer science and just overall technology that can solve so many issues. Whether it's medical issues like creating like nano chips that can enter someone's brain and detect a tumor, or clean water for
Mhm.
underprivileged communities. So again, I think that these are definitely problems that exist in the world, and a lot of people talk about trying to solve them, but these companies are doing a fantastic job in making steps to solve these issues. I mean, do you have any like kind of other ideas or any other examples of
Yeah.
how? Yeah.
No, as we were just talking about all this, right, it hit to me that everything we hit just in this one episode, like all the technology and all the robotics, all the autonomous AI and everything, like it can all be fixed into one like ecosystem in a way. Like if you
Hmm.
think about how you mentioned like the water desalination, water
Hmm.
filtration, nanotechnology that's helping this, right? We can use that same water in the robotics and agriculture, right?
Yeah.
The same exact ecosystem life cycle. You can use this fresh water
Hmm.
from dirty lakes, dirty like ponds or like even like ocean when you like desalinate it.
Hmm.
That will help the agriculture industry, right? And then when you mentioned like the 3D printing and the medical packages that I hit on before with the drones, like all of these are able to like just integrate so perfectly well
Hmm.
that I see the future of technology is just so like cyclical, right? Everything fits into one big unit, and every single piece of technology that is going to be made in the future will have an impact in areas that you can't even think of. It'll just be just ubiquitous. Like every industry will have like technology helping it in one way or another. And I
Yeah.
just love the interconnectedness that we talked about.
Definitely. And I think that like to actually bounce off of one of the things that you mentioned in the beginning of the episode, I just thought of this idea, which is, the drones that carry these medical packages. Another issue that underprivileged communities face is, lack of food. We talked about water, we talked about medical supplies, but we didn't really
Hmm.
touch on food. And so I think that, using these drones, as you mentioned, in the same ecosystem, not only can they provide medical supplies, but they can provide basic ingredients for simple meals. They can send these over like rice or, any form of basic grains, to these people that need it, and maybe create even a robot that can automate the process of creating a simple meal,
Hmm.
using very basic ingredients like rice, maybe some spices, things like that, and just create a healthy but very self-satisfying meal for these people. And it would be really cool to have like a really simple system in almost everyone's home in underprivileged communities, and have them basically have an endless supply of food because these drones are just supplying them, ingredients. And so that was just something that, I thought about using the topics that we talked about in this episode.
Yeah. And to jump on that, I guess, like for that to be scalable, I guess, like the biggest thing we need is energy, right? So when you hit
Exactly.
solar power energy, like new advancements in solar energy, we see that happening everywhere, right? Tesla's like a big one of solar
Hmm.
power and everything. So having like electrical, solar power, all these like occur in drones would
Hmm.
just be amazing. Because if it's solar power, I can imagine like if it is feasible, like transnational, like intercontinental, like deliveries of drones, and they just
Hmm.
use sunlight to
Hmm.
travel across like the entire Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. Like that would be amazing to see happen. And just be able to help at like any day, anywhere. That would be something
Exactly.
that's immensely scalable, but we just need to get there in the next like decade or so.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, to touch upon another piece of issues that happen in these underprivileged communities is education. I personally feel like education is a very vital thing. It's the food for success, basically. And everyone across the world should have access and the right to education.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, some of these unprivileged areas, they don't have the tools necessary to provide them, proper education. There, obviously, sites like Khan Academy or YouTube even that provide free videos and free
Hmm.
explanations of certain topics. But the biggest issue is not having internet connectivity in these areas. And so maybe even creating a way that like these people can like people in underprivileged communities, children can have access to these educational resources without the use of internet connectivity. Like for example, when you go on Netflix, right? Like if you want to watch a video when you don't have internet, like on the plane, you simply just download that video, and there on your phone you have immediate access to that video, and
Hmm.
you can watch it regardless of whether you have internet connectivity or not. And so
Yeah.
something that's kind of related to that, maybe for these children in underprivileged areas, they could have access to educational resources without having the need for internet. Do you have any other like examples or things that you've seen maybe in your time that like you think that it could be used?
Yeah, yeah. In terms of like being able to host these like large amounts of like data and downloads and everything, like
Mhm.
I think the biggest thing that we are like in the correct decade, I guess,
Mhm.
is just cloud computing, right? We're
Yeah.
seeing a lot of companies just switch to cloud computing. Like Amazon's
Mhm.
making a big impact in that area, and all these other companies in tech are also like facing really good advancements in like cloud computing and having like the capabilities to host all these large amounts of data. And I think that they'll just increase exponentially. And as we go to that, inequalities around the globe in technology, like technical inequalities, educational inequalities, I think those will probably like diminish as we see more and more abilities for these like underprivileged areas, underprivileged communities to have access to like these large amounts of data, downloads, and everything. But the biggest thing is just like I guess like being able to have their hands on these like
Mhm.
computers, phones, tablets. Like that's a whole like another issue of like economic political discussion that we could have like a whole episode on. So
Mhm.
that's like a big thing that just needs to happen is equality in tech, and that I think is coming a great way from even just like the 1900s. It's been really big, and we'll see that for sure, especially with cloud computing able to host like all these like big data.
Yeah, definitely. And again, economics is like a huge part in all of these topics that we touched upon. Like,
Hmm.
we have to think about when it comes to 3D printing, for example, how much money it might take to have built these houses, right? That I talked about earlier. Or even like these tools that, a life straw, like how can you provide that tool to communities in underprivileged areas without much cost? Again, it uses nanotechnology. So it's a huge investment by the
Hmm.
company to create LifeStraw. I believe NASA actually created it. And so for them to create that tool using nanotechnology, again, they're expecting it to have a value, right? But how can that reach people in underprivileged communities who might not be able to afford it? That's
Hmm.
something that is super important to think about is that like for these people to have access to these, tools that can help them with gaining food, water, medical supplies, is there an impact on their affordability? Like, does anyone have any consideration on them being able to afford these tools, or are they provided for free? And like the drones that you talked about that are like deliver medical supplies, is this like funded by hospitals, or how exactly does it work in terms of economic wise?
Yeah, I think for this, like in terms of tech to reach the underprivileged communities that we were just talking about, there needs to be a big commitment from political
Hmm.
groups,
Hmm.
and not just like countries or states. Like the whole world needs to be democratized in a way where each country is responsible for not just their own countries, but also helping other countries.
Hmm.
I think that's a big responsibility that in America, like we should be taking, is making sure there's enough equality in the world where we have the tech to help people, right? But we just don't have the finances. But that's
Exactly.
not something that tech can really like solve. And
Hmm.
like financing needs to be like coming from top down. Like it has to be like a trickle down economy, and that's something that really needs to push that companies need to push for. I guess like especially like the startups, big tech companies as well, who are also like always thinking about innovative ideas. Democratizing technology is probably the next big thing after we have all the resources ready. We just need to get in par with political groups, advancements. But in terms of the Rwanda example that I was telling you
Hmm.
about before, it is a contract between the Rwanda government and the U.S. company
Okay.
Zipline. So I think the government in Rwanda is funding this right now just
Hmm.
because it's helping immensely their entire country. But I think to scale that to worldwide, there
Hmm.
needs to be a lot of help, a lot of funding that needs to go in from each individual government and also like the U.S. companies and U.S. government that needs to really like expand this far.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree, and I think that if those drones are provided in Rwanda, every underprivileged community, every
Hmm.
third world country should deserve access to that as well. And again, as you mentioned, it's a huge political thing. Every government in every country needs to kind of approve that, or provide support for that kind of those kind of tools to exist. Just for the sake of the people, like I believe that every human on earth should have access to these basic amenities. And it's unfortunate to see that, homelessness, food lack of food, and, contaminated water is like, existent across the world. That shouldn't be fair.
Hmm.
And so I think that's where technology comes huge play, is being able to solve these issues either autonomously or creating some kind of tool that these people can use to create, solutions to their problems. And so that's just the part I love about technology. It's the reason I got into it. And I'm happy to see that, technology has created such a great impact on the world. And these kind of the things that we've talked about have, huge impacts, and they kind of are solutions for a large group of people, millions, more than millions, 100 millions of people all across the world that can benefit from these, technological advancements. So,
Yeah, no, I think also when we like made this podcast, like we had a real definition on impact, right?
mhm,
And I think it's amazing that we get to talk about these and really like internalize the everyday life of people across the globe and
mhm,
really know like the impact that needs to be done and made. And I just hope that from this podcast, we and all our viewers can have a lot of empathy to these underprivileged communities.
mhm.
And, as like technicians and technologists, we'll have like a great impact in this field in AI and robotics and whatever field you go into. Like, I think it's great to use this for good and to really make an impact across the globe.
Exactly. And taking inspiration from these, tools, these products that are being developed, these new technology advancements, I think it's the biggest part about innovation is basically just taking inspiration from things that are already being developed. And so, yeah, as you mentioned, like this podcast is just almost a leeway, or like a path to kind of thinking of those types of ideas.
Mhm.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing talking about all these topics. It was really great hitting various industries, various
Mhm.
like ways that tech is improving the underprivileged communities. And yeah, I hope like we all learned something new and something great that is happening as we speak.
Yeah, definitely. I enjoyed all the conversation that we had in this podcast, and I hope that you guys all have learned something new about how technology is being used. So again, thank you for tuning in to this episode, our very first episode of this podcast, and please make sure to tune in to the next episode that we have.
Yep. Thank you all.
Thank you all. See you.